Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, it really does take a village to make some of these things, and the job titles and those end credits keep getting more and more expansive. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean that you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm assuming you do. You're listening to us right now. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, basically wherever you find your podcasts. And also, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there, that would be swell. Also, if you could follow us on social media, that'd be great. You can find us on the Facebook, the Twitter, and the Instagram, as the kids call it, at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And plus, this is new, you can find us over at TikTok at In the Seats for, well, the occasional spot of fun, because it's life. You know, we gotta have a little bit of fun while we're doing all this stuff. And something else we have fun at is, you know, working on In the Seats, which is intheseats.ca, our home base where we sit down and we write and talk about film, television, video on demand, film festivals, basically the moving image at large, and that's what we love to do, and we love it when you come read about it. So please come on by and pay us a visit. On this episode, we're getting into some streaming. The new Pixar feature Luca is hitting the streaming service this coming Friday, and we had the distinct pleasure to sit down with one of the members of the team on this fantastic. Well, it's a fun film, you know. I mean, it's Pixar. How can it not be fun? But we talked with John Hoffman, who is the story supervisor on the film. And we go into sort of the mechanics just in terms of, you know, what his job entails. Because, I mean, I don't know about you. When I read all these end credits, I see so many different job titles. It's easy to get a little lost. But he is originally from Calgary. He studied at Sheridan College. And, you know, we find a little insight about just what got him started. And we talk a little bit about the job, too. Just what being a story supervisor entails, and just sort of the machinations of when you're in a big moving company like Pixar, and just sort of the jobs that you have to take, and just sort of the process therein, and how this big massive company still manages to be this real fountain of creativity even after all these years. And well, I hope you enjoy our talk with John, because I thought it was a pretty good one. And I hope you enjoy Disney and Pixar's Luca, which is hitting the Disney Plus streaming service this coming Friday, June 18th. So if you don't have the Disney Plus streaming service, I do recommend you check it out for a scant $11.99 Canadian, because it's got a ton of good stuff. Even if you're not one for the kids fair, or you don't have kids and you're just, you know, a grown-up and wants to watch movies, there's a lot of great stuff there, so do go check it out. But first, enjoy our talk with John, because it's a good one, or at least I thought it was. All right, well, thanks for the time today, John, man. I really appreciate this.
Of course, thank you.
Now, my first question is, this might be a bit of a dumb one, but it's one I've got to ask, because, I mean, whenever I watch an animated movie and, like, I'm enjoying myself, and then I see the credits, and I don't understand what 70% of them are. Can you tell me what a story supervisor is? Like, what's the actual nuts and bolts of that job, sort of in the animated process?
Sure. So I kind of there's a couple different components to my job. So as the story supervisor, I work and supervise the story team, which is a group of artists that do the storyboards for the movie. And so when we make these movies, the first visual pass we do at them is we draw storyboards, which is kind of like a moving comic book. We cut them all together and we project them up on a screen, and we play the whole movie in storyboard form with these little, scratchy little drawings. And we give temp dialogue, temporary music and everything. And it's like watching a movie basically. And we watch it judge it, try to figure out what's working, isn't, and then we tear the whole thing down and then we rebuild it again. And we do that, 8 times or more to make one of these Pixar movies. And then the other side of my job, I also draw some of the storyboards. And then my other side is working with the director and the writers, kind of crafting the story more. I'm not writing pages necessarily, but we're in a room and we're trying to figure out what are the order of events of the story? What's the character doing here? What are they thinking here? How are we doing this? And that's sometimes putting cards up on the wall, setting up, we break these movies into segments called sequences. And so we're like, all right, in this scene, this will happen. And then this, and sort of, how does this all work? And so it's a lot of, that's sort of the two sides of it. And, sometimes the writer and the director and I are all just in a room beating our heads against a wall, trying to solve some sort of problem.
Well, because that's the thing that fascinates me, because especially on a film like this, there are so many moving parts and there are so many different layers. Like, what kind of sort of headaches come up? Is it sort of character look? Is it sort of background? Is it setting? I'm always very fascinated by that. Like, what are the like the quote unquote problems that you might have? Is it a question of a look, or just would it be something as simple as like, okay, maybe that tree was not in the right place at the right time, kind of thing?
Well, I think it can be a number of things. It can be that kind of stuff, but that's sort of later in the process, and that's more of a kind of director problem. Or is it like a sets issue where, all right, this is going on in this scene, but this table's getting in the way because I need the character to go from here to here. So can we move the table around? But sort of the set of problems that we run into story are, we have certain emotional beats that we want to land. And, initially when these things are pitched to the director, we'll pitch just like a little section at a time, right? When we're storyboarding. And so when you pitch that in the room, everyone's laughing, or they're like, oh, that was so emotional. But then you piece it all together and you watch it in the context of the room and it's just dead. And you're like, what happened? This was so great in the room. And so that's sort of the problems that we run into, where it's like, all right, let's dig in. What's going on here? Did we not, and a lot of times it's because we didn't set something up in a scene earlier in the movie. So it's like, all right, maybe if we do this here, then we can land this. And so that's a lot of what we're doing, is sort of like, all right, we've got this section of the movie feels pretty good, but this thing is not working here. Why is that? Do we not have the right shots? Is the dialogue not right? Is the character not expressing themselves quickly? Is it an expression that is just sort of indicating something different? So it's like all of these things that we're trying to sort of juggle at the same time until we can get the sort of whole story playing well.
Well, that's fascinating to me, because just from your description, it sounds like your job is basically sort of about enabling the functionality of the creativity in the moment. And I'm kind of curious, like, how much, like, it feels like you're having to sort of walk sort of on both lines, because one thing about animated films that everyone will laud the creativity and the beautiful visuals, but from a functionality standpoint, I've got to imagine these things are a complex nightmare to put together some days.
They can be, for sure, and I think sometimes it's just knowing when to step out of the artist's way, and you can just sometimes you can kind of sense like there's something magical going on here. I don't quite understand it, but I just need to sort of, let's just sit back and see what this happens. And, we have, there was a sequence on the movie that was not in the script. The writers, myself and the director did not think of a moment like this at all. And we had the story team were brainstorming some solutions for another thing. And one of the artists pulled me into their office and just said, I kind of did something different for the brainstorm. I just had this idea for the scene that I think would be really magical and fun, and this kind of great expression of friendship that these two characters, Luca and Alberto, had. And they had picked a piece of music out for it and pitched it to me. It's like, it's still rough, but I think it's this. And they were really nervous about showing it to the director because it was different than sort of what we had tasked everybody with. And it was beautiful. It was just really exciting and like, oh yes, this is exactly what we're talking about. This is the spirit of the movie in a scene that we didn't come up with. And it just sort of, someone just sort of had this idea that they pitched it to the director, and that scene is in the movie. And it's the two characters swimming and sort of, diving through the water and away from the island. And that was, that originated from sort of that, and just sort of knowing to step back. Does that answer your question?
No, it does. And I mean, it kind of dovetails into something else I'd love to ask, because I mean, I'm getting excited just by hearing your job, because on one end, like, people on the outside looking in will think of sort of the Pixar offices as this unbridled, cavalcade of imagination, but it's a huge thing. And there, like, it really does seem to me that we need to appreciate sort of, I guess, more of the logistical side of things, if that makes any kind of sense, in terms of managing all these personalities and all these creative people that come together to make a movie like this. I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, how important is it to have, I mean, I don't want to say logistical or administrative, but have somebody who sort of knows how to deal with both ends of the spectrum, especially when trying to work on such a huge project like this?
I think it's really important. And all of the people that are in leadership positions at the studio, myself, do a lot of training specifically for that. And it's really finding a balance between, I still want to express myself artistically, but part of the job that I have as well is making sure that the people on the team feel that their voice is being heard and feel that they have the platform to kind of express themselves and sort of do their best job. So it's sort of finding the balance between the two. And I think every department has a similar goal that they're going after with that of, animation is always trying to find, like, all right, the needs of this scene is the character has to go from A to B, and they need to tell this character, this thing. But within that parameter, there's a lot of nuance and performance that the animator can add, and pulling in their own experience, and like a quick little gesture that may just be this like fun little thing they did from that character. But then the director goes, oh, that's great. That feels exactly like Alberto, or that feels exactly like Luca. And then all of a sudden that sort of little gesture becomes a character trait, and it sort of propagates through the film. So I think it's really important, just in general, of finding where to give people the space for that, because animation is very planned out. It's expensive, so we can't do a lot of riffing and improvisation and stuff like that. So you have to find other ways where you can get these little spontaneous things that happen. If you can make it feel spontaneous, even though it was planned out, that's kind of the goal, right?
Right, for sure. Now, I'm curious, because it is such a complex business and it is such a complex industry. I'm kind of curious, is there anything that you learned on the job that you necessarily didn't learn in school or didn't expect to learn on the job?
Oh yeah, a lot. I think part of it is there's only so much that they can teach you in school. I took animation at Sheridan College. It was a 3-year program at the time. And, there's only information that you can give someone. And then a lot of the times too, you may have been taught something in school, but it might not make sense until 10 years later. And I've had a bunch of experiences where I've had an instructor tell me something, and I was like, okay, yeah, sure, that sounds great, but it didn't really sink in. Right. And it wasn't until I was working on something years later where I was like, that's what they meant. Now I get it, and it can be something all of a sudden you understand how different types of, depending on what the fabric of the drapery is, you have to draw it or make it move a different way, or something about eyes. And then there's the whole other side of things of, story artists. You have to have so many disciplines. You have to be able to draw. You have to be able to compose images. You have to be a filmmaker and know how to, juxtapose shots against each other and kind of cut them together to tell a story. And then you also have to understand, acting, character performance. And then there's this whole other thing, storytelling, and how do you tell a story, and how do you get events in a certain order to evoke emotional response. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the audience to feel something. And it's sort of, this is our whole tool belt, is all of those things to get the audience to feel something. And it's rare that you can come out of school and sort of have everything firing in all cylinders. And it's sort of this experience that we get, and these apprenticeships that we get at various studios, that kind of, you start putting all these extra tools in your tool belt. You learn this thing from one movie, and you learn something else from another movie. And, I learned the last movie I worked on at Pixar was Cars 3. And there was experiences and mistakes that we made on Cars 3 that I was then able to apply and sort of try to help us avoid on Luca. And it sort of propagates like that.
For sure. And I mean, it really does feel like so much of the job is predicated on just being open to still learning about sort of all the elements of the craft. And I mean, I'm kind of curious because I mean, nobody comes into this business not being a fan first. Like, was there a movie or sort of a moment in your life where you had sort of the bell go off and be like, I want to do this, I want to get into this business?
Yeah. So growing up in Calgary, I had an uncle in Vancouver who worked in the film industry there. And so I would go visit him on set. And, I loved movies, I loved television, but I also really loved drawing. And I would, copy from comic books and draw characters and all that kind of stuff. And when I would go visit my uncle on set, I sort of was really energized by this amazing experience of all these people working together. And then I could go sit down and watch it in a theater or watch it on TV and sort of see how the whole thing came together. And I was fascinated by that. And I really liked, I played sports when I was a kid. And so I sort of I want to be a stuntman. And that was through most of high school, that was my pursuit. I wanted to be a stuntman. I'd make movies with my friends. I would structure stories around all of the dumb, dangerous things that I wanted to do in whatever little short movie we were going to make, jumping off of cliffs or falling down hills or whatever it was. And then I was visiting my grandparents at a cottage that they would rent in the summer. And there was a woman that was staying in one of the other cottages, and she was drawing her baby. And it was this beautiful sketch. And I was still obsessed with drawing. And I went up to her and I just asked her, I'm like, how did you learn to draw like that? That is a beautiful drawing. And she told me about this school called Sheridan College. This is before the internet existed. And so I hadn't heard of Sheridan College. And she says, do you like animation? And I was like, yeah, I like animation. She's like, well, they teach animation there. And I was like, you can go to school for animation? And that was it. I was like, oh, filmmaking, drawing, combine them, chocolate and peanut butter, I'm hooked. So my last year of high school was me trying to figure out how to get into Sheridan. I took like an animation program at a local group that was in Calgary. I worked on my portfolio. I drew like crazy, and eventually I got into the school. But that was the moment.
Well, that's fantastic. And I mean, just to put a bow on this, because I mean, obviously, sort of on one end, the dream is always to see sort of the work that you do put up on the big screen, and you have had that opportunity in the past, but Luca isn't having that. But I'm kind of curious on the flip side, given the way the world has turned, and just there are so many sort of other outlets for films to be out there and different kind of projects to be out there. How do you feel about just sort of, I guess, on one end, maybe all your stuff isn't going to be on the big screen, but on the other end, there's so many more opportunities to work and do sort of really interesting things out there.
Mm-hmm. I think with the advent of the streamers and everything, there's a lot of interesting opportunities. There's broader animation content in general, and films and TV shows and specials and limited series and all this great stuff that we didn't have before. At Pixar, though, we make these movies to be seen on the big screen. Like, sure, we're all huge fans, and that's how we want to see these movies. Now, the pandemic happened, and there's I'm not privy to the
of course,
decision-making process that went into why Luca went to streaming. But if I think about it a little bit, I think there's clearly there's a backlog of movies right now that weren't able to be released in 2020, and there was already, release dates slotted for 2021, and it gets very crowded. And so I think, Disney made this decision to put the movie up on Disney Plus. And I'm very proud of the movie. I think the movie has a really great message, this message of friendship and sort of this really happy summer movie. And I know I am, and I know the crew is just really happy that people are going to be able to see this movie. And, hopefully it can help people that have had some pretty dark days the last, year and a half of this pandemic. It's a fun movie. It's summer in Italy. And so I think that, the fact that we have Disney Plus is really great. And the fact that the movie's still going to be out there is better than no movie at all.
And you know what? I love the fact that you said Pixar always thinks big, because like when you think that way and you make that way, it's going to translate no matter what size screen you watch it on. I think Luca is definitely that kind of movie. And I just want to say thanks again for the time today, man. This is a lot of fun.
Right. Thank you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.